Welcome back to the show. We're in the studio here today with Jason, who's back from his long vacation. And today we have Ben Zehr with us, who is the co-founder of Reciprocal, which is a venture studio building nature-based climate startups in Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome.
Nada, thank you, Jason. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. So start off by telling us a bit about when did you start Reciprocal? What are you guys about? And why that focus in Latin America and the Caribbean?
For sure. Reciprocal is actually a fairly young organization. Mm-hmm. It's been around for a little over a year, around 15 months on paper. Mm-hmm. But it's something that's been part of, it's been in the works for 3 years. But prior to Reciprocal, I was at Stanford. Prior to Stanford, I was running a couple of businesses in India. And after being deep in one specific business for 5 years, I came out of that wanting to look more broadly at issues that I cared about, climate included, as a broad topic, but within that, working lands or the blue economy, themes that I was interested in me, but I didn't get an opportunity to work on. And so the venture studio model was a way of having selfishly my fingers in all these different things and also being able to go deep and help other people succeed. So while I was at Stanford, that was something I had been thinking about for a few years. But while I was at Stanford, I met my now co-founder, Daniel Gajardo, and we kicked around this idea of a studio focused on Latin America, given all of the things that I think are really cool about the region. And we decided to get it started. So we kind of worked on the idea. Being at Stanford, we spoke to a lot of people who knew a lot about the ventures ecosystem and how that looks in the context of a studio, and especially in the emerging market context. And we decided to launch Reciprocal after, fortuitously, SF Climate Week last year, actually. So, cool. Yeah, and about Reciprocal.
Yeah.
Right? So the venture studio model, for those who don't know, for those at home, it's somewhere between an accelerator and a VC, a little bit of both. But we build, support, and invest in nature tech, climate tech companies in Latin America and the Caribbean. And what that means is that as a studio, we are co-founding businesses with entrepreneurs who know about their specific realm of technical expertise, or they're very familiar with the problem. And so we do research ahead of time. We have a concept note or a thesis, and then we work with the entrepreneur to turn that into reality. And we take it 1 year in residency for the entrepreneur and take them all the way through to a funding event of some kind. That's the building part. As an ecosystem support organization, we also run programming for entrepreneurs. We connect people. We try to be a bridge between the global north and the region. And the invest bucket is kind of flexible. As part of the build process, we invest generally up to $350K in kind and in cash. And we also facilitate investments for companies that are either in our portfolio or we work with them through our other programming. And that can be through an SPV or through making the connections.
How much does $350K get you?
Quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, because in LATAM, it really depends on the country that you're working in and the space, but $350K is enough to get you through the pre-seed stage all the way to a seed round. It depends on how complicated the thing you're working on is. Our first company, actually, we really like making things hard for ourselves. It's a biorefinery of seaweed in southern Chile, and that takes a very long time to develop. It's at TRL4 now. Getting that further along is going to take a bit more investment. So for that, we have to leverage external capital, non-dilutive funding, research grants, and things like that from the country level or DFIs and other sources.
Is that like, I guess, capital efficiency of having a small, being able to use that 350 and really stretch it? Is that because labor is lower cost in that part of the world? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, $350K. I mean, so my previous experience is in India, right? And some dynamics are similar. The labor cost tends to be lower. Again, Chile is not that cheap, but Colombia, much more affordable. You can get really skilled people for much, much less. That really stretches the money. So, for example, I could probably keep a basic team going in Chile or Colombia, $15K from 4 to 5 months, right? It shouldn't be an issue for me to keep the lights on. Right?
Yeah.
So it's helpful, but also the capital available locally is not, it scales, right? If costs are lower, capital available for that kind of work early on is also pretty low. The risk appetite is pretty low. So that's part of our role as a studio, is to try to facilitate the flow of capital from other parts of the world where there's more of a risk appetite and more willingness to put money in upfront to develop these things. And it is cost efficient.
So where are you getting the $350K from?
That's a great question. So as a 15-month-old venture studio, so I'll rewind a little bit. So venture studios in general tend to have unique ways of approaching their funding situation. Often a studio will have an exited founder who's one of the co-founders, and they just have cash that they're willing to burn for a couple of years until they can raise a fund on the side. So we do not have that. So we have some of our own capital. So that's the initial money that we have, but we've had to get creative about how we access funds for ecosystem building from development banks, from philanthropies, and also funding through the companies that we're building. Because then, given how much resource is generally available for specific climate solutions, we can go to different funding sources and, keep our lights on while assisting the entrepreneur to continue building, right? So that's one bucket. And the other is what I mentioned about the programming. So there are all kinds of technical assistance, investment readiness, accelerator type programming opportunities out there that we can co-build with impact funds, for example, or even government agencies. And that helps us build our team.
And you're involved in, tell us about some of the programs you're involved in right now.
Yeah, something really that is top of mind for me that I've been working on. And the reason I had to delay the recording of this by a month is I was just in the Amazon for a couple of weeks. And
we're not jealous by that, by the way, at all.
Would recommend it. Yeah. I'll get into that a little bit more, but the impetus for that is a fellowship that I recently applied to and got. It's an experiential learning process, but a group of impact funds in Colombia organized this program, and I've been working with an impact fund based out of Costa Rica, and they have kind of a regional and global presence. And together we're going to start a program soon, which is a Amazonian bioeconomy venture platform. So we're going to take 10 companies, 10 startups that are at the prototype stage from the region. So the bioregion broadly defines every country that's touched by the Amazon basin, and take them from prototype to a fundraising event. And the great thing about partnering with an impact fund is that they have that capital available. So at the very least, there'll be, $100K, $150K that goes towards the further development of that. And that allows us to bring in other funders as well. So that's the Amazonia Bioimpulsa, the name of the program right now, but we're aiming to have something to show at COP30 in Brazil, which is a really important COP for the region. And so that's kind of one of our milestones when we think about our plan for that program. So the Amazon trip was a way to kind of get a sense of the experiential learning that we want to be part of that program, because we don't want it to be just another accelerator that, holds on to some equity, gives you some cash, connects you to 5 people, and kind of sends you off in a cohort. Very involved. And experiential learning is a really important part of it. Spending a couple of weeks in a mix of like an indigenous community or a city in the Amazon, the urban Amazon, or going to an agroforestry facility or a processing facility, seeing deforestation, right, at the frontier. I think those are really important experiences for entrepreneurs to have, to really contextualize the work they're doing. And I think it's essential to build something that's going to succeed in a local context.
And as part of that, like when you are creating that context, is it about creating context around customers, or just, I guess, the government factors or environmental factors? Like, what is the context you're hoping they imbibe?
Yeah, great question. And some of these things, you can read about them. You can understand that there are different regulations or layers of governance that exist within the Amazonian bioregion, let alone the political boundaries, but even at the local level. One thing that wasn't clear to me as when I first arrived is the layer of indigenous governance that exists in much of the Amazon, where communities of indigenous peoples that have been there for a very long time, they follow a different process, right? They're very consensus based. Things take time. They don't necessarily think about things in terms of economic return, right? What matters for them is continuity. It's almost like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Arrival, but how they communicate.
Oh, in circles.
So time is kind of an ongoing process. So it's a difficult thing to communicate to an investor that, they don't really see this as a 1-year project. This is kind of like a perpetuity project, and you have to approach it in that way. And if you try to rush the process, you're not going to be able to implement your solution with that community. That's just the governance layer.
The concept of IRR does not compute if you don't have time.
I mean, it's not about money, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. So you have to think about
Yeah.
what the communities care about,
Mhm.
right? And it's not money because they barely interact with the cash economy.
I'm just curious as a tangent, like how do you talk about value, I guess, in that context? Because in some ways, like in a capitalist system, we've reduced the value to a commodity of $1, right? And so, and I'll commonly say to our entrepreneurs, like the true value of something is what people will pay for it, right? And that's the thing we always have to remember. But then when you are working with a community that doesn't necessarily want to think in dollars or reals or whatever the currency is, you still need to. The point of innovation is to deploy something that is valuable.
Yep.
So how do you have to shift the thinking in that situation?
Right. It's almost like moving one level of abstraction higher, right? The dollar is a proxy for value, right? And so you have to go to the value, which is they're able to continue the practices they've been doing for 100 years, 200 years. Like food is there, water is clean, right? They're not facing external pressures, like land grabbing from different interests, especially mining in the Amazon is a big issue, and it pollutes water. And clean water supply is crucial for all these communities, and they have their ways of ensuring that they have it. So if whatever solution you are implementing, let's say I deploy something that either helps the government find illegal mining operations, or I'm able to clean up a waste stream from that mining operation, that is something the community can get behind, so they will support that, right?
The value proposition needs to be super clear. It's like, so it still comes down to that. But they really need to understand the value proposition can't be it saves you money. It needs to be the thing you actually get, which is the clean water, the food, stability. Like that.
And money can be a part of it, but it needs to be, again, attached to like, okay, with that money now we can we can buy that one thing that'll help us continue doing what we're doing, which is the thing that we actually care about, right? It's and there are people who would explain this much more eloquently than me, who I was spending time with there. But it's about maintaining that continuity, thinking about 3 generations hence, right? Will they be able to live the same life that I do?
So you're thinking of including then indigenous peoples in that area as part of the program?
Yes, that's the second differentiator. One, the experiential part, which I mentioned. And the second is that we want to include non-traditional founders in our as part of the mix. So often, there are self-organized cooperatives, there are other community level organizations that are doing good work and they're trying to implement different kinds of production practices or, be representatives for their community. And so we want to enable that as well. So they would be part of the program, which would be, it's a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, challenge, but also, an opportunity, especially thinking about like value, right? And then them better being able to understand that if they were going to innovate here in the Amazon, like what would be beneficial for them also and to the rest of the world.
Exactly. And I think it's a two-way street when it comes to learning, right? The entrepreneur in Bogota who is more familiar with technology and software or whichever specific niche they may know a lot about, they don't necessarily know about the context. Even though they live in the same country, they don't know what it's like in Amazonas. So they go there and they learn. However, these cooperatives or organizations that work at the community level, they may not be aware of all the tools available for them to continue or improve what they're doing. Right?
Yeah, to make their lives better too. But then also for us to not be very extractive either. And I think that's the whole point.
On their own terms, right?
How do you, just to bring this back a little bit. So this is energy tech startups. I get the question all the time, how does nature-based solutions relate to energy and climate? I know what the answer is, I think, but I'm curious if you have a perspective on it.
Yeah. It's like you said, right, Jason, every climate story is an energy story. But I think that, the energy transition, for example, is not just about switching to renewables. It's about kind of reimagining what our relationship is to our resources and to the environment. And so, for example, the biorefinery that I mentioned is focused on using biomass, which is embodied energy, to produce products which substitute petrochemical derived products, right? So that is connected to the energy ecosystem in multiple ways. Another company we're working on right now is a biochar startup, also in Chile. So that company will take wildfire mitigation steps and turn that into the biomass that's in the forest after you're trying to reduce the fuel load from the forest. That biomass then becomes potential for a carbon sink, right? And biochar itself, the production is pyrolysis. It's a heavy industry process, and often it involves the production of energy, which people then reuse as part of the process, or they use for their facilities. So co-location with different types of productive facilities are, it's part of the puzzle. So I think that they're very interconnected, and energy is not just electricity. It's carbon. It's the system level thinking, right? Because every living system runs on energy.
Yeah, it's calories or kilowatt hours, right? At the end of the day.
That's a better term.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on that topic, what made you decide to focus on nature-based solutions versus hard tech, which is very popular amongst investors, at least?
And I think nature-based is still hard, but for whatever reason, they kind of live in different buckets in people's minds.
Yeah, nature-based people think about planting trees, and hard tech people think about building factories. But it's not that simple. The reason we wanted to focus on nature-based is that people weren't focusing on it first. And Latin America as a region, if you look at the emissions of the region as a whole, it's just ever so slightly burning fossil fuels is number 2 on the emissions front. If you look about contribution, deforestation, land use change is number 1, right? You think about the cattle herds of Argentina and Chile, Brazil, enormous, right?
Yeah.
That drives land use change, deforestation, right? It creates the problem that we have, but it's also a huge opportunity to reimagine the way that the land is used in those areas. And that's study after study, you see that is the number 1 low hanging fruit as far as CDR. So, and I mean, personally, of course, I'm biased towards more natural systems, and I studied agriculture. It's something that I care a lot about. And my co-founders also are more inclined to those spaces. But Latin America as a region has a unique angle in that nature-based is an especially powerful mechanism, right? From an adaptation and mitigation perspective. Because adaptation is probably where people should be focusing more of their energy in the region. Mitigation, of course, is important, but given the highly rapidly urbanizing population of the region, it's an opportunity to build cities that are more resilient. And given the income levels of the region, it's an opportunity to think about the impacts of climate, which are already happening and will continue to happen, and how we can build around that. So the adaptation piece, I think, is crucial in the region. So nature-based approaches to that, thinking more holistically about how to use natural systems to adapt, is one of the reasons that we found it appealing to go more towards the nature-based route. Do
you find, like, it's very clear when you build a factory, it's going to produce widgets, right? And you know how to sell those to make money. Like, does nature-based solutions struggle with monetization? Or am I like, okay, tell us about what the struggles are.
Well, the fundamental issue is that we don't place value, we haven't traditionally placed value on the services natural systems provide us. And people are trying to do that in different ways. But carbon is carbon. But our environmental issues are multifaceted, and carbon is just one crisis, right? Even climate is just one crisis. So the challenge there fundamentally in our economy today is that we don't value clean air, clean water, and the provision of pollination services, or the possibility that we'll discover a new pharmaceutical in the Amazon.
Right? Biodiversity.
Exactly. Biodiversity as having value is something people are working on now, defining, which we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's the fundamental challenge. So the way people approach nature tech is, okay, I'm going to maybe use a satellite to find places where I can do XYZ intervention. And I'll monetize that. I can collect the data and I can interpret the data and provide that to people who are doing the work. It's one approach. Others are trying to plug in natural systems to the market economy in some way. So in the Amazon, I saw a lot of people trying to create commercializable products out of not acai, right? Because acai is number 1. It's been, you can see the transformation of the forest into like an acai forest where you have market connectivity. So I see that. I tried a lot of things I'd never tried before, a lot of fruits that I'd never heard of, and some of them are delicious. So
it's like the monoculture of acai is the problem, is because it reduces biodiversity is the challenge.
Exactly. So managing that that perverse incentive
Mm.
when you're trying to popularize something that has been traditionally farmed as part of a polyculture and you're moving towards a monoculture. There are some places where acai is a monoculture, but the places I visited anyway, I mean, my tiny view of the Amazon, I could see the difference between one part in Colombia, which was not super connected to markets. You see one acai in 50 trees, right? On the other side in Belém in Brazil, you see maybe 20 out of 100 are acai trees. So you just kind of see like that changing. And in an environment where there are 100 varieties of trees and bushes and other climbing vines and things, that's a big change.
One of the weird challenges of like our like industrialization and our like supermarket kind of ecosystem, right? This goes back to like local food, right? Is like the rise of the monocultures is because like we're sourcing stuff where it's easy to make, but also importantly, like easy to transport. And I think like, hopefully we all relate to this. Like you can't get Indian mangoes here in the US because they won't survive, but it's so much better than any other kind of mango. And
in Pakistan.
Yes. The Alphons, man, that's the best. But it's just like one of those things where it like I guess the distribution network makes it hard to have kind of biodiversity or food diversity, because like the critical thing there is, can you get it to market? And that's why like a lot of the fruits are so monoculture, right? And I'm sure that's what one of the benefits of acai is, like it's just easy to ship to the US, and therefore you can set up a supply chain in a way where some of these other things just won't make it. And it's invisible how much kind of we're literally leaving on the table or leaving on the tree. But man, some of that stuff is so tasty.
No, and I think, I mean, that goes back to like the global north and, you know, the demands that we have of having, you know, that same fruit available 24, not only 24/7, but throughout the year, right? Like 365.
Exactly.
Versus, you know, I grew up in Pakistan, you've lived in India, you just came back from India, and, you know, just being able to eat like fruit there and like taste it. And just the value of that, like somehow we have lost value of that, right? So it's like taking those kind of things into account too, not just biodiversity, but the value of how food actually should be tasting.
The variety and the seasonality of it is something that's just part of the rhythms of life, right? I also grew up in India, and you think about Indian fruit, people think mango immediately. They might think of something else like lychee or what have you, but I ate so many different kinds of fruits that I can't find here. Right? Sitafal, which is like the custard apple.
Yes.
That's very around Diwali, right? It's interesting. And chiku, which it's called sapota.
Okay.
But it's like a brown, fuzzy, kiwi-looking thing, but it's super sweet. As a kid, I mean, everybody's favorite. But then you realize it's extremely sugary.
Like mangoes too.
Especially Alfonso mangoes.
Oh yeah.
But your question, I mean, I'm putting my ag hat on now, which is the hat I wore for a very long time. But our global food system is set up because we optimize for different things, right? Like in the US, we optimize for convenience, consistency, price. And globally, we optimize for calories. And so my parents are both agronomists, come from like a farming family. My uncle's farm here in the US looks very different from my grandfather's farm in India. We put all of our resources into breeding specific varieties of crops that would yield as much as possible in as little land as possible and be compatible with, you know, synthetic fertilizer and irrigation systems and intensive cultivation, right? Being really, really close to each other and being really, really short, all the different traits. And so that's given us the system we have today. It's encouraging to me to now talk to people who are in that space, developing new varieties of seed. They're trying to diversify the crop mix. They're, you know, starting to use more biological fertilizers and thinking a bit more holistically. Agroforestry is something that I try to talk about as much as possible because it's a really interesting bucket of system types. And it's as simple as adding trees to a farm. That's like the basic definition that I can give you for that. I'm not sure how familiar you are, but it can be animals plus trees, animals plus crops, crops plus trees, all three at the same time, right? We're leaning a bit more into the symbiosis between different species, whereas before it was like trying to maintain lab conditions in the field. Only the one species that we want, and only the one, and no insect species, no fungal species, just the, right? So now we're thinking more holistically about soil health and the microbiome of the plant and the soil and how they interact and how having different plants actually helps.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a gradual change in the food system, and it takes like generations to do that. So
yeah. So, and did you say you have been doing this for now 15 months?
Yes.
Yeah. So how's describe to us the journey, what's it's been like, and what are some of the challenges that you come across?
Yeah. Well, let's see where to begin on the challenges. So we started out, my friend and co-founder, Danny, we met at Stanford. We started this together, but we also met two others who are now our business partners. They are also Chilean. They live in New York and Berlin. Danny lives in SF and I live in Houston. So first challenge, remote studio. It makes sense because given that we don't have a center of gravity yet, investing in an office space doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and having everyone move, So we've been in the process of figuring out our, as a team, I think many founders can relate to this, understanding your cadence, your work cadence, navigating time zones, if fully remote teams are more common these days than ever before.
Yep.
And so that's been a challenge that we've been, navigating, and some successes, some failures, and it's a constant process of learning, right?
Yeah.
Especially as we've added people to the team, also in different time zones, right? In Chile and Colombia, in London, right? Just adds complexity to the picture, but it's also super cool to be able to work with people anywhere. Number one challenge, logistically, right? And I always, as somebody who's more ops focused, I tend to think about the logistical ones first. But also strategically, as a studio, we started off thinking, okay, it's a studio. We're going to go out and we're going to raise money for a fund, and we're going to, make the classic studio model happen. Easier said than done. Bad funding environment for stuff, and a studio is not like a startup. You can't kind of go out there and pitch the studio and say, just trust me, I'll produce 10 startups that are investable for you. And it doesn't make sense for us as a studio to take capital into the main entity one time, because we are ideally producing, 5 companies a year, 10 companies a year. So that doesn't really make sense long term. But like I said, there are many approaches to the studio model, and we've been finding our own space there.
Yeah.
So trying to build bridges to LATAM curious, climate focused investors in the States and in Europe and in the region, building those relationships for the long term, and then also building closer relationships with other actors in the space, impact funds, development organizations that are already there, even NGOs. So we can work with them to build our own track record. That's kind of been the blended approach that we've taken. So we need to build track record so that we can raise the fund in a couple of years. In the process, we'll develop our own pipeline of entrepreneurs and investors for either SPVs for those startups, or to join as LPs when the fund is ready to start shopping around. So that's been our approach now. So the strategic, figuring out where to funnel our short-term energies, our energy today, to both continue to build our team and also build track records so that we have the long-term vision in mind. That was a evolution, right? And in the process, we've built a couple companies, and we've hosted events, and we're starting these accelerator programs, and we've done boot camps and brought startups to the US. So it's just opportunistically doing what we can to continue to meet more people within our niche and expand our network, so that we are always, building the potential for LPs to join our fund in the future, and to just kind of have a strong, strong roster of entrepreneurs who are ready to start something, or who are kind of waiting to start a business, so we can bring them into the studio and start doing more of that work.
Yeah. How do you filter for founders? Or how do you identify them?
Yeah. It's another blended approach. One, universities are a great source. Regional universities and local universities, they tend to be less well networked than Stanford, to say the least. And there's a lot of great talent there. And often the thing that you do is you go and you join a large corporate. I mean, in Chile, all the sectors are highly concentrated, and the place to go is like the large forestry company if you're a forestry engineer, or a mining company if that's your expertise. So there aren't as many opportunities for those PhDs or master's level potential operators or technologists to go to something new, something that's focused on solving the challenges that come with that increased intense mining in Chile, especially. So universities tend to be a good source. And through our business partners and other connections in Chile, it's a small country, everybody's 1 degree of separation away from you, more or less. But university contacts are really helpful investigators and heads of departments. So that's one source. We also do events in partnership with other organizations that are trying to build their own funnel. So it's really the filtration. This is top of funnel stuff, but just trying to get people in who have the right technical background. They're connected to the region. They can either be living there or from there or intending to go there, right? So it could be somebody in Houston, right? Somebody at Rice who's here studying. They're getting their MBA, but they want to start a company and have impact in Mexico or in Colombia, right? That would fit our profile. And beyond that, it's really, there's a basic requirement for entrepreneurs. But beyond that, it's more about attitude and commitment to what you want to solve. I think, and you know this, right? Yeah. Those building blocks are the same, and that's kind of something you have to finesse, or you learn that through the process.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question then, because if you bring in someone from college, and you said you have like a 1-year fellowship, you call it, how do you train them and then refine them to be these entrepreneurs, especially remotely?
Yeah, and it's a great question. It's something that we're learning to do. I think a lot of the time of a venture builder in a studio or an entrepreneur in residence is a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
And with, again, this Amazon program, there may be subject matter expertise and deep commitment, but how do I run a business?
Yeah.
It's like a big question. Yeah. In the more traditional VC route, finding an investor is like the North Star. I need to have a great pitch deck. I need to be able to communicate my value proposition and raise money. I think that's important, but there are lots of programs for that already. Focusing on the building blocks of a business. How do I actually run the organization? How do I build a team? How do I create a culture and make sure that my product is delivering, right? We focus on that, but that's a digression from your question. Our residency program is a year, plus or minus. There is like a vetting process on paper before that. So we will meet periodically with the entrepreneur. We'll have a series of kind of discussions about the space that they want to work in. You gauge what you can from that based on your rubric, and then you start working. And during that time, you focus on whatever the weaknesses are. I think the studio model is much more hands-on. So it's not going to be just these 5 workshops and these few speakers, and then you create a pitch deck and you go. Like we figure out what are the needs that need to be addressed for the specific entrepreneur, and we focus on that. So it could be that they just need a mentor, or they just really need work figuring out how to do a proper operational model, right? How to do a sensitivity analysis or a techno-economic analysis. Maybe they're a really good technologist, but they need help in different ways. So it's very bespoke.
Yeah, and you both you and your co-founder are part of the team too, right? Yeah, so that helps.
Yeah, generally there's one co-founder kind of on each team for the duration of that year, and then we'll be an advisor ongoing. But it's a co-founder and it's a venture builder from Reciprocal with the entrepreneur, and then we add people to the team as necessary. Ideally, there are 2 co-founders by the end of the process. Yep.
Super exciting. You've lived in many different places. How did you end up in Houston?
Yes.
Great question. I never expected to be in Houston. It's really personal reasons. I mean, my partner lives here. She's in medicine, and my job is much more flexible than hers. So I'm here. So I didn't necessarily have a reason from my professional side to move here in the first place, but I've been pleasantly surprised by the community here. And I think Houston has a lot to bring to this fight, so to speak. Coming from the SF ecosystem, it feels like the center of the world, center of the universe, especially when it comes to climate. New York has got its own thing going on, but Houston flies under the radar, I think, because people here are pragmatic. They tend to look at all the different pieces and bring everything to the table in a way that I think wouldn't necessarily fly in a more, I'm not calling it like a purist ecosystem, but I think every city every region has its own specific niche and specific way of approaching these problems. And Houston's is much more, I mean, of course, coming from legacy industry here, and from the perspective of engineers, people who are actually like at the facility and dealing with problems there, much more hands-on. So Houston, the reasons for coming here was totally personal, but I think it's a great place to be for this. I think given the talent here, the capital here, and the innovation ecosystem that already exists, I think it's a great place to be for climate, especially we're talking about more traditional energy transition, but even the underappreciated reciprocal elements of that energy transition. I think it's a super interesting place to be.
I'm curious, mostly because I don't know as much about the California ecosystem. So one of the things you said that in California, there's this kind of view that it's the center of climate tech. I guess tell us what that means. And I don't know if
we would question that.
Oh, well, it's like, I don't question that there's a view, but I'm curious kind of where that emerges from. Because when you think about a lot of the like energy and climate companies of the past, they didn't necessarily come from California. I guess there's just Tesla, maybe not just Tesla, but like where does that mindset come from?
I mean, I think it depends on how you measure.
Yeah,
you measure this. There's a lot of capital in Silicon Valley that's being allocated for climate right now, and by that metric alone, it is the center of the universe. It far outstrips any other ecosystem in the world, right? At the same time, I think that philosophically, California has led on a lot of environmental issues in the past, and we have Berkeley. You've got the UC system. You've got Stanford in that very concentrated area. And there are a lot of really smart people doing a lot of very interesting research on the environmental side and very talented technologists. So I think that you could argue correctly that it is the center of climate tech, but I think it's a very specific kind of climate tech that I've seen, at least. There are strengths that they play to there. So, I mean, obviously software is unparalleled, right? But even making big bets that may not pan out 90% of the time, right? Making a bet on something that somebody in Houston wouldn't invest in today. I think the risk appetite is high because they've seen a payoff, and so investors in the SF area are willing to take risks.
Yeah, and I think this mindset that also comes from California is that for like a legacy industry or a corporate entity to actually be able to innovate and transform is really hard, right? I mean, if you listen, and you know, the innovators dilemma and like all the professors from Berkeley, right? Like that's what they preach, is that actually for a corporation to totally innovate, and particularly talking about oil and gas companies. Whereas over here, we don't embrace that philosophy, and we really think that no, our oil and gas companies are going to transition, right? And they're going to lead the transition in some ways. So it's a different mentality too, because we are so invested in oil and gas.
I think that's very insightful. I think that there's a mindset of, you know, we need to disrupt industries from the outside that has borne fruit in the past, and I think it's valid in a lot of ways. Innovation from within corporates is notoriously slow and you know, difficult because there's an agenda already, right? Like the cash cow is there. So if this is like I may as well spend my resources on the cash cow. So the belief is that the incentives are there for disruption to come from the outside, and there's also this ethos of building a better world, right? And that you know, dreaming about the better world, right? So I think that drives a lot of innovation there, but I think it takes you to a certain place. And then when it comes to scaling, especially something that is physical infrastructure, that's kind of where Houston, I think the ecosystem here has strong advantages.
Yeah, no, we like to hear that from someone who's not from Houston, who's come here and says like, you know, I think I'm going to stay. Right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm here.
That this could be a place where we you can innovate, and especially when it comes to climate tech and energy transition.
Yeah. What was something that was like a pleasant surprise in the Houston innovation ecosystem?
I've met people. I think so. Again, I had zero expectations. I thought everybody here was just like oil and gas stan, and you know. But all jokes aside, I've met people who come from industry who are passionate about the issues I'm passionate about, and like they talk to me very technically. Like we're going to solve the problem. Okay, that's a given. Now we're going to do A, B, C, and then you know we're gonna if we mess up there, we're going to go back and try this thing. Right? It's a very hands-on, pragmatic attitude. Right? Action-oriented attitude. That's something I like. Right? Yeah. You know, I love imagining things. I'm not as good at it, to be honest. I'm more of an action-oriented person, more of like, how do I operationalize this and turn into something that works? And I've really enjoyed that about Houston, about people I've met anyway, who are in this energy transition space. Yeah.
You said you live in Montrose. Have you found like a hidden gem in Houston, a place that you like? That has also surprised you?
No, let's go like in Montrose specifically.
In Montrose specifically.
Montrose. Let's see. I mean, there are tons of great spots in Montrose.
Yeah.
We're talking food.
Either or, whatever.
Food's an easy one.
Yeah. Always an easy one.
In Houston,
food is an easy one. Well, I will be subconsciously thinking about Montrose, but first I will recommend and shout out to Taylor Chapman at Big Climb Adventures, but you should get on the bayou.
Yes.
Kayak, stand-up paddleboard. Start at like the Arboretum.
This is the Buffalo Bayou?
Bayou.
Yeah.
Buffalo Bayou, yes.
Yeah.
Arboretum all the way to Eleanor Tinsley. Amazing. There's a bird sanctuary in between. You feel like you're somewhere.
I didn't know about this. It's a bird sanctuary?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's super lush.
Even in summertime, you can do it, you think? Or you would?
The water level now is pretty high.
Okay.
And the water's moving pretty fast. It's very exposed. So I wouldn't recommend going in summer. Maybe wait until November or something.
Yeah.
But it's great. Would recommend that.
Okay.
Gem. I didn't expect it.
So you go from the Arboretum, like there's a launching point to get onto a kayak?
There are a few, yeah.
Okay.
So there's one bridge. I don't know all the numbers yet.
Okay, so there's not a rental place there. I have to bring my own kind of situation.
Bring your own.
Okay.
Get like an inflatable one, whatever if you have something.
Okay.
I'm sure Taylor will lend you one.
Taylor's offered, and I got to take him up on it.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. No, he lent me one, so he's got you covered. There's a launch point over there, and there are multiple places you can get out in Buffalo Bayou Park and Eleanor Tinsley Park.
I got a dumb question. Do you have a friend pick you up, or do you get an Uber when you're done?
So
like, how does that mechanically work?
So you can either have people like you can drive one car down and then carpool back to the drop point, launch point, or you can just deflate your inflatable and just Uber back to your car.
Okay.
A lot of options.
It's very okay. There are ways to do this. We figured this out as a society. Okay, so that's cool. So you literally can canoe or kayak down the bayou.
Yes,
that's awesome.
I just wouldn't drink the water.
Okay,
just don't swallow the water. Don't follow it.
I was
gonna say, I was like, I've fallen in the Charles. I've fallen in the bayou. Like, you just gotta fall in every major body of water and make sure you survive. Fall in the Amazon.
I did get into the Amazon. Yeah. A lot of things you shouldn't do. But no, in Montrose.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like my recommendation is going to be pretty mainstream. I like. So there's a trio, or I guess it's a quad of restaurants and gastronomic establishments. One is March, which is like a very high-end restaurant, multi-course thing. The other is Rosie Cannonball, and right next to it is Montrose Cheese and Wine, and there's a new restaurant now, the fourth one. But Montrose Cheese and Wine, free wine on Wednesday evenings. I think 5:30
I know our
to
team
7.
meetings are going to happen now.
Free wine tasting, great cheeses. And then Rosie Cannonball, you can go straight from there to Rosie Cannonball. They have a reverse happy hour from 9 to 10 where pizza and drinks are half off.
Yeah.
Check that out. It's 2 blocks from my house, so I'm there a lot.
Yeah. We're always stopping at Cheese and Wine for the Portuguese egg tarts, which is surprisingly good.
I love those.
Yeah, they are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun little corner. But it is funny how there are these little walking pockets, and that's one of the few places you see people just always, I don't even know where they're going. It's only a strip that's half a mile wide, not even. But it's bustling, so it's nice. Yeah.
So it was a character building experience. Reminds me of being home when I have to cross Westheimer.
Yeah.
Where there are no crosswalks and big trucks.
Oh yeah. We would also love to hear from you on being in Houston, coming from California, from San Francisco Bay Area. What do you think is missing in Houston when it comes to our ecosystem, our startup ecosystem? And as we evolve and as we build the energy tech nexus, what should we be keeping in mind?
I'm again, I'm a newbie here, right? I'm not as familiar with all the elements of the ecosystem that exist. Within my space, I don't see as much activity on the nature side, especially. And, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. I'm hoping personally to build that community a bit more and especially explicitly connect it to Latin America and the Caribbean. So we have an event coming up, Houston Climate Week, Thursday morning. If you're out there and you're a LATAM interested founder, investor, or somebody who wants to work in climate in the region, or you're curious about what's out there for partnership opportunities, et cetera, hit me up. But as far as the needs, it's hard for me to say in terms of entrepreneurial support at different stages, just because I'm still understanding the full breadth of things available here. The innovation ecosystem is very strong. I think just topically around nature tech, but like biodiversity as a service or whatever term you want to create for different elements of this more nature-focused theme, nature-based theme. I think that's something that will probably come with time when we demonstrate there are opportunities there, but there aren't as many people working in that space. And one thing that I would love to add to the ecosystem is some of that. Boot camps, like what does it mean? What are payments for ecosystem services? How can they be implemented and monetized? How can I think about the systems level view of my specific project that I'm implementing here? Because often if I'm coming from a place of optimization or I'm really focused on one specific innovation, my perspective is going to be, I have this thing, it's going to fix everything. I'm going to put it there and it's going to work. With natural systems and with more complex systems, I think it's important to have that view of like this is an interconnected system and considering all those elements. That's something that I try to preach and something I'll hope to bring a bit more to the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's needed. I mean, Houston is an industrial city, right? So it makes sense that we think about systems only in the industrial perspective. But you will be also surprised how many people are thinking about biodiversity and are thinking about nature-based systems because, Houston also is growing and expanding really fast. And we're losing our ecosystems and people are noticing it. The monarchs, for example, their population has declined 90%. And they're crucial for, pollination and so many other benefits that we get as a society.
Yeah, Houston's a very diverse confluence of different ecosystems, actually. I was being enlightened by somebody who I met here in Houston about how diverse this region actually is.
Yeah.
And of course, Houston feels the brunt of more intense storms and more flooding.
Right.
And all these other existential risks. But I look forward to meeting those folks who are talking about.
Yeah. No, I'd love to introduce you to some of those. How can people who are listening help you be part of what you're doing? How can they reach out?
So I mentioned very briefly, but if you're a founder interested in working in climate in Latin America and the Caribbean, I would love to talk to you. If you're an investor or another stakeholder in the ecosystem who's trying to deepen your reach or understand what the environment is in the region or within a specific country, I would love to chat with you. We exist to, yes, increase the quantity and quality of startups coming out of the region for climate and nature tech, but we also are trying to increase the flow of information and capital and people between Houston and Latin America and the Caribbean, right? Berlin, Latin America and the Caribbean. I think there's a lot of connections that can be solidified, and I would love to talk about any and all things there.
So you don't have to be based out of Latin America or the Caribbeans.
No, because if we're thinking about an investor from the US, very welcome. Even a founder who has a connection to the region, who is currently living in Houston or has lived in Houston their whole life, but wants to do work that impacts the different areas that we care about in the region, very open to chatting. And the best way to reach me is probably LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest. And that's going to be in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Or come to one of our events at the Energy Tech Nexus.
Yes.
That's the other way to do it.
Yeah. And our Café y Clima, Houston Climate Tech, or Houston Energy and Climate Week event, Thursday, 9/12 at 9 a.m.
Okay. We'll make
more
sure
events more details coming soon. So
good.
Good.
Yeah.
I know. We're here recording and it's like 32 days away. So
I know.
it'll be soon. Yeah. Good to have you here.
Yeah,
It's been
thank
great.
you for
Super fun.
sharing with us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for
Awesome.
having me.